Hello, divine, messy humans, and welcome back to the podcast. I have had a massive realization over the last probably 12 months or so. My empathy and being an empath was a response to trauma growing up. Now, since I've begun my healing journey, I always thought of it as this superpower. That as a child, I was told that I was too sensitive, that I needed thicker skin, that I needed to toughen up. And that it was one of those qualities that as I grew into as an adult, it served me better and better because I could read what was going on around me. I could feel other people's emotions. What I've come to realize, however, and learn through other teachers, is that being an empath is very often a trauma response. So whilst I use it as a superpower now, the way it developed was through trauma. So let me explain. Growing up, and I completely understand this, by the way, there is no judgment here because I suffered a very similar thing at around the same kind of age. But when I was growing up, my mother was quite explosive, especially around her hormonal cycle. And that explosion for me as a young child was terrifying. I used to find it really, really scary and I would feel unsafe. Now, I remember hating being yelled at or being in trouble as a child. I was a people pleaser, which again is another trauma response, but we'll go into that in another episode. But what I realized is that my empathy and my being an empath came from watching that behavior, watching around that same time every month when I knew the explosions would happen and where I could get yelled at for a very slight transgression or even end up with a wooden spoon across my butt and the back of my legs, which again, it was the 80s. That's kind of what happened to us back then. Now, I'm not condoning the behaviors. I'm not excusing them, but I'm also not blaming them. I completely understand. My mother is a very loving woman. She is just a divine creature and she loves me dearly. And also it can be true that multiple things are true at the same time. The same way that I know in my explosions that I have traumatized my children and that one day they will need to work through it and come to terms with it. So not only their conscious brain understands, but also the subconscious aligns. But in my child view and child mind, I was looking very closely for those behaviors that would lead up to the explosion. And I figured if I could be a good enough girl, if I could just do the right thing, if I could be just a good enough child and be quiet enough and be well behaved enough, that then I would stop that explosion. Now, in my adult self who's experienced this, I also know that my mum couldn't control those explosions. They were, it was just something that could not be controlled. And I've been there myself, so I really do understand. However, as the child, and I see it in my son as well, that is really, really frightening. And so to keep the safety, to keep the peace, to keep the happiness in the home, I adopted those behaviors of looking and reading that behavior. Now, in reading that is how I became an empath. That's why I can read people so beautifully now, is because I was watching for if I could catch those behaviors in time, if I could control it, then I would be safe. It's interesting then as I go through my journey as an empath, both with friends and in past relationships, how it then played out. And something I only realized in talking it through the other week was that if I felt what other people were feeling, I also kept myself safe because I didn't need to dive into my own deep feelings, my own hurts. And so again, it stopped people getting close to me. So it became a defense mechanism. Being an empath meant that I could understand you, I could feel what you were feeling, and also keep you at bay to stop myself getting rejected or feeling abandoned by not allowing that closeness, not allowing you into me. It keeps people at a distance. It keeps people at arm's reach, and it keeps me safe. So understanding the way that being an empath has played out through that trauma patterning, I can see as a grown-up how it is such an incredible superpower, especially in the work that I do, helping people through their own traumas, being able to feel what they're going through, having that real ability to sit with them in their vulnerability and to become vulnerable myself in that. The way I've created the superpower from the trauma is to now have my own ability to receive and to get vulnerable, to allow people in more. Yes, it is still boundaried. Yes, there are conditions. However, I don't need to keep people at arm's reach anymore. I don't need to use it as a distraction mechanism or as a defense mechanism or as a pain behavior. I can use my empathy truly for good, to help people heal. Think about how it plays out in your own life. What did you have that you needed to be hyper-vigilant of growing up? Because realistically, empathy is being hyper-vigilant of somebody else's behavior to ensure that you are keeping the peace somehow. With my ex-husband, that used to work that I would be able to tell from the energy when he came in what kind of evening we were going to have. I could tell over the weekend when things were going not so great or when things were going to go okay. I also learned to read the children's behavior to see how I could keep them comfortable, keep them happy, and stop them from triggering any responses. So a lot of that empathy comes from hypervigilance, which is that trauma response. It is you being in fight and flight. It's you really closely monitoring everything that is going on around you, giving you the sense that if I can control this, then I can control my surroundings and I will keep myself safe long term. I will survive another day. I will be accepted by my tribe because I've got a handle on things. And also it allowed me to get closeness to other people without needing that closeness back. So it was a self-protective thing as well. And for me, it just blew my mind when all of this stuff got put together. Because here I was thinking that it was some superpower, that this was like a psychic sense that I had developed. And yes, it is. It falls under that clairsentience type sensory ability. And also recognizing that it comes from trauma has been a huge eye-opening healing for me. It's allowed me to take those inner children and take some of the responsibility of needing to control other people's behaviors off the table. It's given them a break. They don't need to be in hypervigilance anymore because myself, as a grown adult, can do that for them. And I am not responsible for other people's behavior. I'm responsible for mine. I can't stop other people exploding or yelling or shouting or responding unresourcefully. I can't control it. And being okay with that is how I've allowed my empathy to both be able to tap into that feeling with them, to hold space with them as they heal, and also to not take it on as mine and not use it as that self-defense mechanism. So how does this land for you? How has empathy developed in your life? Did you have that feeling of hypervigilance as a child or through those teenage years where you felt that you were able to control the scenarios you were in by being able to read other people's behaviors? Was it a way of you keeping yourself safe? It's really good to dive into it. And if you've got any questions, please reach out to me. I am always happy to either go deeper on the topic or to do one-on-one sessions, or even just offer the 20-minute coaching call, which you can find on my website, to talk about how it's affecting you. Anyway, remember, we are all connected to the divine. We are all messy. And the more we can accept our divinity and our messiness, the easier our human experience becomes. Sending you love until next time.